The hall is silent. Only the echo of footsteps and the low hum of a burning torch break the stillness. In the center of the room, an empty throne, not abandoned, not forgotten, just waiting. You look at it and feel something strange. Not fear, not awe. Something else. Curiosity. Because deep down, you can sense that whoever once sat there no longer needs to. They've already won. But how? How can absence hold more power than presence? Why do we chase what resists us? And why, in a world overflowing with noise and abundance, do the rare few who speak less, give less, and appear less command the most attention? It's not charisma. It's not luck. It's something Machiavelli understood centuries ago, the laws of scarcity. He watched kings rise not through generosity, but through restraint. He saw empires built not by the abundance of their gifts, but by the mystery of their limits. And he left behind clues, 5 subtle laws hidden between his words, each designed to turn scarcity into influence. Today, these same laws run the modern world. They shape how brands seduce you, how leaders lead you, and even how people make you crave their attention without saying a word. So if you've ever wondered why the less you give, the more people want you, or why silence can shake a room louder than any speech, this is where it all begins. Because sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. The fewer your moves, the greater your power. Machiavelli. Now let's step closer to that throne. Because before you can rule the world, you must learn how to rule desire itself. Imagine this. You walk into a crowded room. Everyone's talking, laughing, performing, trying to be seen. And yet your eyes don't stop on the loudest one. They stop on the person in the corner, the one who doesn't need to be noticed. That's the paradox of the human mind. We crave what's missing more than what's present. Psychologists call it the scarcity bias, a built-in mechanism from our evolutionary past. When resources were limited, what was rare was what meant survival. Abundance was background noise, scarcity was signal. And that instinct never left us. It just changed its costume. Today, it's not water or food we chase. It's attention, validation, opportunity. The rarer something feels, the more we project value onto it, even if that value doesn't actually exist. Think about it. A message left on seen, a luxury brand dropping only 50 pairs of shoes, a creator who disappears for a month only to return with one haunting sentence. Each absence builds tension, and tension is addictive. You've felt it, the quiet ache that grows in the spaces where something should be. It's why unavailability feels magnetic, why the one who withholds affection becomes unforgettable. Because the mind doesn't just want to possess, it wants to solve. And every absence becomes a puzzle your emotions try to complete. Machiavelli understood this centuries before neuroscience had a name for it. He saw that presence creates comfort, but absence creates power. When you step back, people lean in. When you speak less, people listen harder. When you give less, people start to imagine more. But here's where it gets darker. What if scarcity isn't just a psychological glitch, but a weapon, one that can be designed, controlled, and used? Because Machiavelli didn't just observe it, he engineered it. And that's where the first law begins. People value what they cannot easily possess. So, what happens when you learn how to create that impossibility? Deliberately? Florence, the 16th century, a city painted in gold and blood. Merchants whisper behind silk curtains. Priests pray for power more than purity. And somewhere in a candlelit study overlooking the Arno River sits Niccolo Machiavelli, scribbling words that will outlive every crown that ever touched a king's head. He wasn't a ruler. He wasn't even rich. But he had something far more dangerous, the ability to see what others refused to notice. Machiavelli watched the courts of Florence devour themselves, not because of war, but because of generosity. Princes who gave too freely were adored for a moment, then forgotten the next. Rulers who were always available, always accessible, became ordinary. He noticed a pattern. The more a leader offered, the faster his value decayed. The more he appeared, the less he was seen. And that's when Machiavelli wrote something subtle, hidden between the lines of The Prince. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But what he really meant wasn't fear of violence. It was fear of loss, a psychological scarcity, the dread that comes when something powerful could be taken away. He realized people don't stay loyal out of love. They stay loyal out of risk, the risk of losing access, the risk of being excluded. And so the true master doesn't flood the world with his presence. He rations it, carefully, strategically. That was Machiavelli's hidden observation. The appearance of restraint creates the illusion of depth. The less you reveal, the more others imagine. And imagination is a far more potent force than reality. Centuries later, we see it everywhere. From billion-dollar brands to the quiet confidence of people who never overshare. Their power isn't in what they give, it's in what they hold back. And that leads us to the first law of scarcity, the one Machiavelli used without ever naming it. Control the flow. But what does that really mean? And how can you use it without becoming manipulative, or worse, invisible? That's what we'll uncover next. Imagine a ruler standing before his people. He doesn't speak often. When he does, the entire court holds its breath, every sentence weighed like gold. Now, imagine another ruler. He speaks daily, makes promises freely, gives everything at once. Which one feels more powerful? It's not even close. Because power isn't measured by abundance. It's measured by control of distribution. That's Machiavelli's first law of scarcity. Control the flow. Never give everything at once. Never reveal your full hand. Because mystery, when managed correctly, becomes a renewable source of power. Think of how your attention works today. Streaming platforms drop one episode per week, not because they can't release all 10, but because anticipation is currency. Luxury brands sell out not by accident, but by design. Even people, yes, people, create scarcity through rhythm. They reply slowly, they reveal selectively, and it drives you mad wondering what they're thinking. Why? Because the brain releases dopamine not from receiving, but from waiting. We are wired to crave what we almost have, and whoever controls that rhythm controls desire itself. Machiavelli saw this centuries before neuroscience ever caught up. He wrote of princes who revealed their plans one piece at a time, letting curiosity ferment into loyalty. He understood that control over information is control over emotion, and emotion moves nations. But here's where most people fail. They mistake silence for neglect or withholding for coldness. But that's not scarcity. It's absence without purpose. True scarcity is intentional. It's the art of giving just enough to keep others leaning forward. So before you flood the world with your words, your attention, your availability, ask yourself, what if the thing you're giving so freely is the very thing that made you valuable? Because once abundance becomes routine, appreciation dies quietly in its sleep. And that's why Machiavelli warned, never exhaust your power in one gesture. But here's the twist. Control alone isn't enough. Even the most measured ruler can fall if he fails to master the next law. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine a door. It's not locked, it's just slightly closed. You can almost see what's behind it, but not quite. And that almost is what drives you crazy. That's the illusion of limited access. The second law of scarcity Machiavelli understood better than anyone. It's not about what's truly rare. It's about what feels rare. In Renaissance Florence, Machiavelli saw how princes manipulated not with armies, but with inaccessibility. A glance, a delayed response, a guarded chamber. Every act whispered one message. You can see the crown, but you'll never fully touch it. And that whisper was enough to make people obey. Humans, by design, are addicted to exclusivity. Our brains confuse difficulty of access with value. The harder something is to reach, the more worthy it must be. It's a cognitive bias, one that luxury brands, influencers, and leaders exploit daily. Think of it. An invite-only event, a members-only card, a private story that disappears in 24 hours. We tell ourselves we want the thing, but what we really want is to be chosen to have it. That's why Machiavelli advised rulers to limit their own exposure. He understood that if everyone could walk into the palace, the throne would lose its aura. If every secret was told, curiosity would die. If every emotion was revealed, influence would dissolve. The illusion of limited access is about control, not deception. You're not lying about your value. you're framing it. You're teaching others that your time, your words, your attention aren't infinite. They're earned. Because when everyone can reach you, no one truly values you. And when no one can, they start to worship the mystery instead. But here's the dangerous side of this law. If you pull away too far, people stop reaching. If you create too much distance, desire turns into detachment. So the real art lies somewhere in between, just enough distance to spark the chase, but close enough to feed the illusion. And that's where Machiavelli's next lesson begins. Because sometimes disappearing at the right moment can make your presence eternal. There's a strange power in disappearing, not the kind born from avoidance or fear, but the kind that turns your silence into a mirror for others to stare into. Machiavelli knew this well. He watched rulers fall because they stayed too visible for too long. When a king's image becomes ordinary, his crown becomes decoration, not authority. So he crafted one of his most dangerous lessons. Absence sharpens respect, while presence weakens it. The strategic absence is not withdrawal, it's choreography. You leave just long enough for people to feel your absence, but not so long that they forget you. It's a balance between mystery and memory. Think about how this plays out today. A creator vanishes at the peak of their fame. No posts, no updates. The audience panics, theories spiral, engagement skyrockets. Then they return, one image, one phrase, and it breaks the internet. That's not luck. That's design. Because presence satisfies curiosity, but absence fuels imagination. And imagination is infinite. Even in relationships, the same rule breathes. When you give constant attention, your value normalizes. But when you step back with purpose, when you retreat to grow, to build, to observe, your presence becomes charged with meaning again. The human mind hates a vacuum. When you're gone, it fills that space with stories, some flattering, some haunting, but all of them keep you alive in memory. Machiavelli saw that power doesn't just come from what you say, it comes from what others think you're thinking. And that space of uncertainty, that invisible air of suspense, is where reverence is born. But there's a warning. Hidden in this law, disappearing without intention is not mystery, it's neglect. The art lies in leaving traces, not voids, in retreating strategically, not emotionally. Because when you vanish too long, your power cools. When you vanish just right, it crystallizes. And those who master that rhythm of appearance and silence become unforgettable. But Machiavelli knew one more truth about silence. Sometimes saying nothing is louder than any absence at all. Listen carefully. Not to me, to what happens in your mind when I stop speaking. That discomfort you just felt? That's power. Machiavelli understood that silence is never empty. It's an amplifier. It makes the other person fill in the blanks. And in those blanks, their own fears, desires, and assumptions begin to echo louder than any words ever could. This is the silence principle, the fourth law of scarcity. In the Florentine courts, words were weapons. One rumor could ignite a war, but the masters, the ones who truly ruled the room, rarely spoke first. They watched. They waited. And when they finally spoke, every word felt carved from marble. Because silence forces others to expose themselves. The impatient talker reveals too much. The nervous explainer undermines their own authority. But the one who can sit in silence without anxiety controls the tempo of the entire conversation. Modern psychology confirms it. People equate silence with confidence. When you don't rush to fill the air, you appear certain, even if you're not. And certainty commands respect. But silence also creates what scientists call the information gap. The moment someone senses you know more than you're saying, their brain itches to close the loop. They lean in, they guess, they overthink. And every second they do, your influence deepens. That's why silence has always been a strategy of leaders, negotiators, lovers, and artists. Because what isn't said shapes emotion more powerfully than what is. A pause can seduce. A withheld answer can haunt. A quiet gaze can build a myth. Machiavelli once wrote that he who controls appearances controls minds. But what he left unsaid was that silence is the ultimate appearance. It's the performance of restraint. And in a world obsessed with volume, Restraint becomes magnetic. But silence alone can't sustain power forever. There's something more potent, something Machiavelli hinted at, but never dared to name. Because sometimes the rarest thing you can possess is the strength to not take everything you can. Picture this. A banquet table overflows with gold, wine, and laughter. Everyone is reaching, grabbing, consuming. But at the far end of the hall sits one figure, quiet, untouched, unmoved. He could have everything within reach, but he chooses restraint, and that's what terrifies everyone else. This is the law of sacred scarcity, the final and most dangerous law in Machiavelli's unspoken code. Because it's not about what the world withholds from you, it's about what you choose to withhold from the world. You see, most people mistake abundance for success. They equate more with better, louder with stronger, constant with alive. But power in its purest form is the opposite. It's the refusal to be consumed by what consumes others. Machiavelli admired leaders who practiced voluntary limitation, those who could have everything but didn't. Because restraint isn't weakness, it's a signal. It tells the world, I am full even when I take nothing. Modern psychology agrees. Self-control, delayed gratification, selective focus is the most visible sign of confidence. The person who doesn't chase, who doesn't need to respond, who can stay still while others scramble, creates an aura of depth that feels almost sacred. Think of it like this. The diamond isn't powerful because it sparkles. It's powerful because there's only one. And the same goes for your attention, your time, your emotion. The more deliberately you give them, the more value they hold. But here's the paradox. Sacred scarcity isn't about manipulation. It's about self-mastery, the ability to restrain not just what you show others, but what you indulge within yourself. Because if you can't withhold from your own impulses, you'll never control how the world perceives you. Machiavelli hinted at it. Philosophers refined it. But every powerful person lives it. Restraint is reverence. And that's the thread tying all the laws together. A single invisible force that turns silence, absence, and control into influence. But what exactly is that thread? And why does it make scarcity feel divine? That's what we'll unravel next. Look closer at every law we've explored. Control, limited access, strategic absence, silence, restraint. And you'll notice something. They all orbit one invisible idea. Not power, not fear, but perception. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in teaching how to dominate others. It was in revealing how reality itself is shaped by how others see you. He understood that the world doesn't reward the most capable. It rewards the most perceived as capable. That's the invisible thread, the art of shaping attention without demanding it. Psychology calls it the perception gap, the distance between who you are and what people think you are. And the masters of scarcity manipulate that gap with surgical precision. They understand that visibility without mystery breeds boredom, that abundance without contrast kills meaning, that if everything is accessible, nothing feels significant. So they curate what they reveal. They edit themselves like an artist cutting away marble to reveal form. They know that the human mind doesn't fall in love with facts. It falls in love with fragments. Because imagination fills in what truth withholds. That's why a shadow is more captivating than the object casting it. Why a half-told story lingers longer than one neatly resolved. Why silence, absence, and scarcity create an emotional gravity that abundance never can. In the Renaissance courts, Machiavelli saw that people don't just follow power. They project their own fantasies onto it. And the fewer details you give, the more they fill the void with admiration, fear, or desire. It's not deception, it's design. You become the screen their minds project upon. But here's where it gets deeper. Scarcity isn't just about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself. Because if you don't believe your value is rare, you'll keep giving it away until it feels ordinary. So the invisible thread isn't control, it's self-awareness. The quiet knowing that what's rare in you doesn't need to prove itself. But Machiavelli left one final paradox, a truth hidden between all his contradictions, and it changes everything. Every idea Machiavelli left behind carried a shadow, a dual meaning. Because power, he knew, is not built on truth alone. It's built on contradiction. And this is the deepest one of all. The hidden paradox of scarcity is this. The moment you try to look powerful, you lose power. The instant you force scarcity, you expose abundance of need. Think about it. When someone withholds affection to seem mysterious, you can feel the insecurity behind it. When a brand tries too hard to look exclusive, it starts to reek of desperation. The illusion of scarcity collapses the moment it's no longer effortless. Because real power doesn't chase reverence, it attracts it by existing fully in itself. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology gave it a name. He saw that manipulation without self-control is theater. It might fool the crowd for a while, but never the soul. In today's world, we confuse performance for power. People think restraint means detachment, that silence means superiority. But true scarcity doesn't come from pretending to have less. It comes from genuinely needing less. It's the paradox that breaks every false master. The more you depend on being desired, the less desirable you become. So what did Machiavelli mean, really, when he wrote about fear, loyalty, and power? He wasn't glorifying manipulation. He was exposing human dependency, because the only person who truly controls others is the one who no longer needs to. That's the hidden essence of all 5 laws: control, access, absence, silence, restraint. Each is just a mask for one principle: detachment. Not emotional coldness, but psychological freedom. The ability to walk away without losing yourself. To be wanted but not owned. Visible but never available on demand. And that's where every illusion of scarcity leads. Not to domination, but to inner sovereignty. Because the rarest thing in any era is someone who doesn't need to prove they're rare. But if this is true, how does it shape the way we live now, in an age that rewards constant presence, noise, and access? That's where we go next. Step into the digital age, a world buzzing with notifications, pings, and infinite streams of information. Everything is available, all the time, to everyone. And yet, somehow nothing feels valuable. This is the paradox of modern abundance. Scarcity doesn't exist in the world, it exists in perception. Machiavelli's laws didn't disappear, they simply got buried under the noise. Every attention economy platform, every viral brand, every influencer who disappears for a week, they're all tapping into the same psychological truth he observed centuries ago. The human brain craves constraint. Too much access numbs desire. Too much exposure breeds indifference. And the rare, the curated, the deliberately limited, they rise above the static, commanding focus without force. Look at your own life, your time, your energy, your presence. They're finite, and yet you spend them like endless resources. You're always available, always reachable, always giving, and the world notices, barely. Machiavelli's 5 laws translate perfectly today. Control the flow of your attention. Create the illusion of limited access in your interactions. Disappear strategically to let curiosity grow. Use silence to let others fill in the blanks. And practice sacred scarcity. Reserve your power, your energy, your presence for what truly matters. Because scarcity isn't manipulation, it's intentional living. It's the ability to decide where your value lies and refuse to dilute it. When applied with consciousness, it turns ordinary moments into authority, ordinary people into unforgettable presences. But here's the catch. Modern life tempts you to forget restraint, to chase abundance instead of significance. And yet the throne from the opening scene, the empty throne, remains relevant. It was never about dominance. It was about self-mastery, perception, and timing. The crown is never for those who grasp, it's for those who hold nothing unnecessarily and let the world chase what they cannot claim. And now, after all these laws, all these threads, all these paradoxes, we return to that throne. The hall is the same. The torchlight flickers across stone walls, casting long shadows. The throne sits empty, exactly as it did at the beginning. And now, you understand why. It was never about power over others. It was about power over the self. Every law we've explored, control, limited access, strategic absence, silence, sacred scarcity, was designed to teach one fundamental truth. Authority begins within. Machiavelli's princes, Renaissance courtiers, modern leaders, they all chase perception. But perception without mastery is hollow. It can command attention, but it cannot command respect. It can manipulate desire, but it cannot inspire loyalty. The throne is empty because true influence does not occupy a seat. It radiates. It exists not in gestures or abundance, but in restraint. In the quiet moments when the world expects more, and you give less, intentionally. You see, the invisible thread, the one connecting all the laws, is not strategy alone. It is self-discipline. The rarest scarcity is the discipline to withhold attention, energy, words, desire, until giving them produces meaning. This is why the empty throne fascinates us. It represents a power we all chase but rarely achieve. The kind of power that cannot be purchased, begged, or forced. The kind that emerges only when your presence is earned and your absence respected. In this light, Machiavelli's laws are no longer cold calculations of manipulation. They are lessons in awareness, in knowing your value, in living intentionally in a world that constantly demands your excess. And when you do this, when scarcity becomes practice rather than pretense, you don't just influence others, you influence yourself. You become unforgettable, not because the world fears you, but because it cannot help but notice you. And as you stand before that empty throne, one question lingers in the air. What are you still giving away that could make your presence truly rare? We've walked through centuries of thought, from the shadowed halls of Renaissance Florence to the endless screens of the modern mind. We've seen the laws of scarcity unfold: control, limited access, strategic absence, silence, sacred restraint. And now the threads converge. The lesson is not about manipulation. It is about presence and perception, about becoming someone the world notices, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Every law we've explored points to the same truth. True influence begins with self-mastery. Control the flow, not to trap others, but to protect your own energy. Limit access, not to tease, but to preserve your value. Disappear strategically, not to punish, but to allow curiosity and anticipation to flourish. Use silence, not to intimidate, but to give space for thought, reflection, and desire. Exercise sacred scarcity, not to play games, but to respect yourself, your time, and your power. In essence, Machiavelli wasn't just teaching rulers how to dominate. He was teaching how to be rare in a world of excess. And that rarity, when authentic, is magnetic, enduring, almost sacred. Today, in a world obsessed with constant giving, constant sharing, constant noise, we forget the power of restraint. We confuse availability with generosity, overexposure with importance. But abundance without boundaries is invisible. Scarcity without authenticity is empty. The throne we keep returning to, the one empty at the center of this journey, represents more than power. It represents intentional living, the kind of life where every word, every gesture, every moment carries weight, where absence enhances presence and silence amplifies meaning. So here's the final challenge: not to manipulate, not to control, not to vanish simply to be desired, but to hold something sacred within yourself and allow the world to notice it naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. Because when you do that, scarcity stops being a strategy. It becomes a way of being. And the question that lingers now: what part of yourself are you still giving away too freely that could make your presence unforgettable? The hall is quiet again. The torches flicker. Shadows stretch across the stone walls. The empty throne remains, silent, patient, eternal. And now you realize it was never about the throne itself. It was about what it represents. It is restraint. It is presence without excess. It is the understanding that true power doesn't demand attention. It invites it. You've traveled through centuries of insight. You've seen how Machiavelli's laws of scarcity shaped kings, courtiers, empires, and now, our modern world. But the most profound law isn't written in his books. It is lived. It's lived every time someone resists the urge to overexpose themselves, every time they pause instead of speaking, every time they withhold not out of fear, but out of purpose. Scarcity isn't about trickery. It's about honoring your own value. It's about protecting your energy, your attention, your essence. It's about choosing what to share and what to hold sacred. And here lies the final truth. Those who master scarcity don't dominate others. They dominate themselves. They become rare, not because they are distant, but because they are intentional. Not because they withhold indiscriminately, but because they understand that giving too freely diminishes everything. So the throne remains empty, not as a symbol of absence, but as a symbol of possibility. And now it comes to you. What are you still giving away too easily? What part of your attention, your presence, your life, your energy are you handing over to the world? That could make you unforgettable if you held it instead. Because scarcity isn't just a strategy. It is a mirror reflecting how you value yourself. And the way you answer that question may determine how the world finally sees you. The throne is empty. The choice is yours.